In San Jose, California, gun owners have become a target in a first-of-its-kind gun control law. They have to pay an annual fee and carry proof of liability insurance.
All of us drive every day, and we're required to keep proof of insurance and registration with the car.
I don't think we have a constitutional right to have a driver's license and have a car. People argue we do have one to bear arms.
With gun laws changing in almost every state in the union, we take a look at the reasons behind this one and the reaction.
The U.S. is in a tight labor market. More jobs are open than there are people to fill them, and that's impacting the whole of the economy.
Her lack of a degree in that position doesn't really impact her capability to do the job.
Some states are opening doors by removing the demand for a college degree.
ATF said the agency...
And 12 years ago, I broke news on a fast-breaking story of federal agents secretly letting thousands of U.S. weapons traffic into the hands of Mexico's deadly drug cartels. What became known as Fast and Furious is now the focus of a new international documentary.
Can you tell me what the concept was when you started working on the film, what your idea was?
We talk with a filmmaker to fill in some blanks in the shocking real-life story.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. America's battle over guns and gun restrictions is heating up. A major Supreme Court decision on the Second Amendment last year ignited movements across the country, in some cases to crack down on gun ownership, in other cases to loosen up gun controls. Amid the debate, San Jose, California became the first city in the nation to pass a law requiring gun insurance and annual gun fees paid to a nonprofit. And other cities and states are watching to see how this turns out.
In San Jose, California, the public gun firing range is full on a Saturday afternoon. Under a first-of-its-kind law being eyed nationally, San Jose gun owners are in the crosshairs, targeted for a marked change in how the local government regulates their weapons.
The San Jose approach quantifies the financial cost of emergency calls involving gunfire. Estimates put the price of police and emergency calls at about $8 million a year for the city.
Add to that the cost of medical care, mental health and victim services, and criminal justice. Injuries involving guns hit the entire community in the wallet in a major way that advocates say is the responsibility of gun owners. San Jose's new law requires people who own firearms to carry gun liability insurance and pay an annual fee of $25. That includes for shotguns and hunting rifles. The fees are to go to a nonprofit for programs to prevent injuries involving gunfire, and gun owners must keep documents proving insurance and fee payment with each firearm at all times, presented to police upon demand.
So we had to do something that would recognize the reality that guns are in our streets, they're in our community. How do we make gun ownership safer? So that's the premise we really started with.
Sam Liccardo is the brains behind the gun measure. He devised the ammunition to support it as mayor of San Jose, a post he held for the 2-term limit until this year.
There are things we know that gun owners can do to protect children, to protect their own families and their communities. And we know that insurance is much more effective at those kind of preventative measures than the government is.
Because the insurance will require certain things in order to cover.
We want insurance companies to get in this game, encourage gun owners to get gun safety locks, get gun safes, to take gun safety courses. The trigger locks and the chamber load indicators, so we know that premiums can have that financial nudge that gun owners might need.
San Jose's strategy hasn't been tested before, but the measures, like keeping proof of compliance papers with the gun, aren't unusual, according to Liccardo.
All of us drive every day, and we're required to keep proof of insurance and registration with the car. This is not, you have to keep proof of identification with you at all times. This is keep it with the gun. that is the instrument that can cause the harm. Just demonstrate that you've paid the fee and you have the insurance.
I mean, the difference being, I don't think we have a constitutional right to have a driver's license and have a car. People argue we do have one to bear arms.
So we feel confident that there's plenty of precedent for this.
For example, he says 19th century laws required some people to post surety bonds, a form of insurance, to carry weapons in public. The heated debate over gun rights and gun control intensified after one of the most important Supreme Court rulings on the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Last summer, the court struck down a 100-year-old New York state law. It had required people who wanted to carry a concealed gun to first convince the government they had a good reason. Tossing out the law forced numerous other cities and states to back off on similar gun restrictions, including Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., and California. At the same time, San Jose became one of many local governments seeking new gun restrictions that stand up to court challenges. Its law was 2 years in the making and designed to be bulletproof to constitutional challenges. But there are plenty of reasons the law is a misfire, according to Tim Biddle of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association watchdog group.
The ordinance requires you to keep proof of insurance and proof of payment of the fee with the gun at all times, and to produce that proof anytime a peace officer requests it. There's no other details than that. So I assume a peace officer could knock on the door of your home and ask you for proof that you carry the insurance and that you've paid the fee. And then the ordinance says if you don't produce proof to a peace officer when requested, you're subject to a fine and confiscation of your firearm.
His group is also challenging the $25 fee.
There are fees involving guns that already exist. Why would it be wrong to impose a fee now?
Well, it's not necessarily wrong to impose a fee. We believe it's a tax, which under California law would need voter approval, that it never got. Also that it's a violation of your First Amendment rights to free speech and association, because the fee has to get paid to a private nonprofit organization that the city designates, and so they're forcing gun owners to associate with this organization and to support it financially, whether or not the gun owner approves of the activities or the messaging of the private nonprofit.
The fee is on hold while the courts decide that issue, but another problem, he says, is that San Jose's law targets gun owners who've done nothing wrong.
Now, obviously, criminals are not going to be participating in this program. They're not going to be obtaining insurance, which is the other half of the ordinance. You have to maintain gun harm insurance. And they're not going to be paying the fee or registering their guns or anything like that.
What about that argument?
Yeah.
You're making the law-abiding good people basically subsidize and kind of pick up for the criminals.
Well, part of this is one way to rapidly identify who the criminals are is when you're asked, do you have insurance or have you paid a fee? If the answer is no, that puts you on a radar. It means someone's got to pay a fine, and obviously that enables police department to ask additional questions. So that is helpful.
Have other cities or states talked with you or San Jose about this and described some interest in following the same path?
Yeah, a lot of mayors reached out to me because I think mayors are uniquely frustrated by violence in their communities.
Frustrated also by lack of action in Congress when it comes to laws that gun control advocates would like to see enacted nationally. Opponents arguing that new laws aren't the answer to America's crime and violence problems. For this constitutional issue that divides America and inspires perennial debate, if San Jose's law holds, it's bound to trigger support from many and continued opposition from others reluctant to promise compliance.
I think they're talking about $25 a year, and the money would go to a nonprofit that would help gun violence, prevent gun violence, and help victims and that type of thing.
I mean, as long as it actually did that, then I would be all for that. I think it's ridiculous. I think it won't do anything to solve the issues it sounds it has with crime.
You'll do it if you have to, I suppose. When the time comes? Maybe, maybe not.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't feel.
Could there be a civil disobedience type thing going on in the city?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think gun owners, if they see common sense laws that will actually make a difference, they would support them. But not when the laws are there's no logic behind it. It's just nonsense. It's political nonsense.
A court hearing on San Jose's law is scheduled for June 15th. Next up, why more companies are saying no college degree, no problem. Maryland and Colorado are two of the latest states to announce they're opening a growing number of jobs to people without college degrees. Due to a labor shortage, opportunities are being offered to people with less education but more vital experience. Lisa Fletcher reports when college requirements are lowered, it could be raising standards.
I grew up with food, as you can tell. We had, food was not, it was always something, a part of our family.
Patty Brzezinski has a knack for making desserts and can whip up a recipe for fruit cobbler from scratch.
I want to overmix it.
After high school, Brzezinski didn't follow a traditional college path. Instead, opting for culinary school, where she learned to be a baker and pastry chef and worked professionally for almost a decade, until a divorce in the 90s changed everything.
I was getting divorced, I was a single mom, I was taking care of everything, and the reality of baking and cooking and so forth that the cooking shows, a lot of it doesn't show you, is that it is long hours, not great pay, it's not a lot of benefits.
Office temp work and applying for full-time jobs became her focus. At the time, 74% of new jobs were in occupations where a 4-year college degree was typically required. Then she found a rare opportunity, a job with the state of Maryland that allowed her to submit work experience as a substitute for a college diploma. So Brzezinski put her best foot forward, mixing 1 part office skills with 1 part kitchen management, and sold her way into a job she's grown with for nearly 10 years.
Is there one area that you consider your strong suit?
If you can work with the public in a manner, no matter what place you're in, that can lead to a lot of open doors.
Her lack of a degree in that position doesn't really impact her capability to do the job.
Mark Townend is the director of recruiting for the state of Maryland.
Patty works in our employee benefits division, and she is involved a lot with a job that involves her personality. She just interacts very well with people. She has a soft skill set that you might not necessarily get from a formal education that makes her exceptional for her job.
Last year, under then-Governor Larry Hogan, the state of Maryland reset its hiring standards and became the first state in the nation to eliminate the 4-year degree requirement from thousands of state jobs. 3 years ago, the number of unemployed Americans swelled to more than 23 million. Since then, it's shrunk to about 5.5 million. And there are more jobs available than people applying. When degree requirements are dropped from the application process, employers have access to a deeper pool of talent to consider. And there are some 70 million people over the age of 25 in the workforce without a college degree. Google, Delta Airlines, Tesla, and Bank of America among the big-name companies slashing degrees from certain positions.
Is experience a substitute for a degree?
Depending on what the degree is for. And because there's some things that you do need a degree in. I don't want a doctor who went for, worked at 10 years somewhere and now they call themselves doctor. But in my case, it really did. When you are working such as I have, you're always going out and looking at classes, any type of training that pops up, because the more I learn or pick up, I can apply that to no matter what I do in the future.
I think what we're addressing is a shortage. There is a current situation in Maryland and I think across the country where we have a lot of people retiring, a lot of vacant positions, and there's just not enough people applying for these jobs. It's more about just taking a look at what's out there.
Bridget Gray guided the state of Maryland through its degree reset. She works with the Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit Opportunity at Work and is helping at least 10 other states follow Maryland's lead.
How do you convince state employers, public and private sector employers, that these people are in many cases outstanding and can even exceed the qualifications of somebody with a degree?
We gain skills through vocational training. We gain skills through our community college experience. And so the conversation with employers is really thinking about how do you drill down on what is the actual skill you need for this role versus thinking about does the degree cover that?
Gray says this movement and the stability that it can bring to millions of families is laying the groundwork to bring back America's middle class.
I believe it will create a pathway for everyone to move into the middle class. And if you have the skills to do a job, you should be able to get that job.
Does this movement pose any sort of threat to higher education?
No, you're always going to need degrees. There are people who are different learners. There should be opportunities afforded for them if college is not the pathway in the beginning.
With the prospects of a career ahead of her, Brzezinski no longer worries about making a living in a kitchen. Instead, she makes desserts for herself and friends on her own time as a hobby.
You make people happy with what you do. I like what I do now too. Really it's the same sort of feeling you get for doing that. And that's one of the reasons why I love my job, is taking care of people.
A recipe for success for Patty and maybe the economy. Sweetening life for once overlooked workers.
We have bachelor's degrees. I think it's a great idea what they're doing, but do you have any clue if other people don't think it's such a good idea?
Well, some people may say it's not fair, but the recruiting director that I talked to stressed two things. One, nobody jumps to the head of the line. And two, we're always going to need people with college degrees. The truth is, these jobs are not specialized enough to require a degree, so the talent pool should be wider, and it gives employers more options, and it gives employees more opportunities.
And that real-life experience often beats out college anytime.
Definitely.
Thanks,
Definitely.
Lisa. When we come back, a new documentary with startling allegations about the U.S. role in Mexico's drug cartels. It was 12 years ago this month that I began breaking a series of stories that ultimately exposed shocking U.S. government operations. Federal agents were secretly letting thousands of U.S. weapons be trafficked to Mexico's drug cartels. The story is largely centered on one of the operations, codenamed Fast and Furious. Many people on both sides of the border were killed by thugs using guns trafficked under the watch of U.S. agents. Among the dead, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. Now a new international documentary series seeks to fill in a lot of blanks when it comes to the shocking alleged U.S. role in the rise of Mexico's famous drug kingpins.
The battle President Calderon is fighting inside of Mexico, it's also ours.
Romaine Bolzinger is director of Narco Circus.
Can you tell me what the concept was when you started working on the film, what your idea was?
The documentary series covers the 2000 to today. And we understand that the strategy of the U.S. government, of the cooperation with the Mexican government, was, also circus.
Narco Circus traces the U.S. partnership with the Mexican government and, yes, its most favored cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, under Mexican President Felipe Calderon. Calderon was elected in 2006 and started a war against the cartels. But Bolzinger says the war was just a facade and led to the rise of infamous Sinaloa kingpin Chapo Guzman.
The war was a circus at that time because the government of Mexico was protecting the Sinaloa cartel, and the war was against the enemies of the Sinaloa cartel. So in the early 2000s, Chapo Guzman is not a famous narco trafficker. He's one trafficker among others. And with the help of the government, of the Mexican government first, he could grow a lot with the help of the U.S. government also. And The most interesting part of that story is that Chapo Guzman was an informant of the DEA for 10 years. So the DEA helped Chapo to eliminate, to kill, or to arrest his competitors.
In 2014, some corroboration of the alleged U.S. role in the rise of Mexico's Sinaloa cartel was presented in the Chicago case against the son of a Sinaloa leader. He alleged that Fast and Furious was part of an agreement with the U.S. to finance and arm the Sinaloa cartel. In exchange, the Sinaloa cartel would provide the U.S. with information against rival cartels seen as more dangerous. The son of the Sinaloa leader also claimed that U.S. agents gave him, Chapo Guzman, and other Sinaloa leaders carte blanche to operate their drug business without interference, as long as they snitched on other cartels. In court documents, U.S. prosecutors admitted the U.S. had a signed cooperation agreement with the Sinaloa leader, and a DEA agent testified about working with Sinaloa leaders. Meantime, the Sinaloa cartel has long smuggled most of the drugs trafficked to the Chicago area, priming the deadly gang-related violence there. It wouldn't be the first time the U.S. had secret deals with cartel bosses. Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega was once on the CIA's payroll, and the U.S. allowed certain Colombian cartels to smuggle drugs into the U.S. as long as they helped in destroying more dangerous rivals.
So is there a deal? Is there a free pass for the Sinaloa cartel? Well, we'll never know. But at the end of the day, the DEA and the Mexican government helped to create a big monster which become the Sinaloa cartel, which is now, very powerful, and it's almost impossible now to dismantle this organization.
The documentary series is called Narco Circus. It will be broadcast this coming fall on mycanal.com. After a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Here's a look at what's coming up next week on Full Measure. A major trend is what some call woke investing. That's with giant companies like BlackRock said to be forcing controversial social policies on states whose money they manage. Now, some states are fighting back.
Combined, I think there's like 7 states that have moved about $5 billion just out of BlackRock. And you'll see more and more. When we started moving money, that moved the conversation. And now people pay more attention to it.
It's a fascinating backlash against environmental social governance, or ESG investing. We'll have that story next week on Full Measure. If you want to hear more of our original stories and reporting, you can check out our podcast, Full Measure After Hours. Until next time, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable.